I'm sure that many of you here know me, whether it's because I have been at Fourth Universalist for almost 2 years, or whether you are someone that I know from online that I invited to come hear this today. But I pose this question because it is a more complicated question than it seems at first. For me, growing up in the early 2000s as a closeted trans woman in the conservative parts of the Midwest, it was a particularly loaded question. For so many, the journey of coming out is a long and complicated process that involves so much struggling with this question of who am I, with figuring out one's sense of self. In particular, my late teens were a time of immense challenge in dealing with this question. So let's time travel a little bit. The year 2007, practically a different world. I was finishing up my first year of Bible college. I was visiting my family, flipping through the channels while I lounged on the sofa downstairs. I would often stop at MTV and VH1 looking for new music. They had made a move to a large amount of reality TV shows, but there was still a good bit of music on in the early 2000s. But on our cable TV, wedged in between VH1 and MTV, was the country music channel. And you see, none of my friends liked country music. In fact, pretty much everybody hated it. It was not cool to like country music in my friends group. People liked punk, rap, a lot of the emo and pop punk of the early 2000s, but country, we made fun of. And so, wanting to fit in while I was so deeply in the closet, I had to make fun of it too. But every once in a while, I would stop on that country channel in between. The second I heard someone coming down the stairs, I would, of course, quickly flip onto a different channel. But one of those times, I caught sight of someone playing who was roughly my age, playing the guitar, singing a song full of emotion, of love and loss. And comparatively, I realized I felt emotionally dead from being in the closet. The video playing was Taylor Swift's Teardrops on My Guitar. And honestly, 15 years later, I'm not sure that I can explain it, but something clicked. The music was great, and I was impressed. There was something cool about her. Something deep inside my closeted spirit resonated with her, wanted to see her as a role model for where I could go in life. But I flipped the channel as someone came home and mentioned it to no one. I couldn't tell people that I liked her music. They might figure out that I was trans solely based off of that little tidbit of information. I could not show interest in anything remotely feminine. After all, when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, I would not watch Mrs. Doubtfire because I was worried that liking it too much might give me away. I had to hide myself. I was so desperate to hide myself. I couldn't let myself enjoy things, and certainly not a teen girl singing country music. So, did Taylor Swift directly cause me to come out? No, but her music for me became so linked with my journey of self-acceptance. I remember as I slogged through years of working in retail, humming along to songs like 22 and I Knew You Were Trouble. And I still have to resist the temptation when someone walks into the room to say, I knew you were trouble when you walked in. It took a while to break that habit. And then her album 1989 became the soundtrack of my coming out in 2014 and 2015. Because of all this, today I wanted to use her music to consider how we define ourselves. Let's turn back the clock again, this time to 2006. Taylor Swift had just released her debut album at 16 years old. I'd like to look at the lyrics from her song, A Place in This World, which she began writing at 13 years old. She writes, I don't know what I want, so don't ask me, 'cause I'm still trying to figure it out. Don't know what's down this road, I'm just walking, trying to see through the rain coming down. Even though I'm not the only one who feels the way I do, I'm alone on my own, and that's all I know. I'll be strong, I'll be wrong, oh, but life goes on. Oh, I'm just a girl trying to find a place in this world. To me, these words echo the teenager experience of the early 2000s and perhaps of the time before and after. But I think that feeling of struggling to find our own place in this world is something that while we talk about it a lot for teenagers, it's also something that so many of us struggle with at any age. I think in particular, this pandemic has been a time where many of us have run face first into this dilemma. In 2020, so many of our routines, our patterns, and our identities were disrupted. The things we did to distract ourselves and to numb ourselves, disrupted. The things we did for fun and our work routines, and in New York City, our commutes, disrupted. When they were all paused or drastically changed and challenged, we were hit with this question: what is our place in this world? If we don't have our normal routines, then who are we? In the struggle of trying to find our own place and trying to define ourselves, the default can often be to turn to what others want and try and become the person that they want from us. And her song, The Lucky One, which we heard earlier in the service, released on the Red album, she writes about this pressure to make ourselves into whatever it is that everyone desires. She writes, "You had it figured out since you were in school. Everybody loves pretty, everybody loves cool. So overnight you look like a 60s queen. Another name goes up in lights, like diamonds in the sky, and they'll tell you now, you're the lucky one." But is this person truly the lucky one? Does having fame, popularity, and the feeling of being cool bring fulfillment? It definitely can bring a rush of feeling rewarded, of feeling important to others. But when hard times come, and they will, are we fulfilled if we have only made ourselves into what others want? When challenges come, will that popularity stick around? Will you feel like what you did was what you wanted? It does not seem like a healthy or a good way to establish our identity based on what others want. That is not an identity built on solid ground. And for Taylor Swift, she found herself trapped in the limitations of being a country artist. Her music was making some inroads into pop culture, but many did not believe that she could make the jump into pure pop music. Despite being young and new at this time, the music industry was already placing limitations on who she could be. When we put ourselves in these boxes for other people, this popularity that we may gain there, it can stop us and hold us back from growing and becoming fully ourselves. It will place us in others' boxes and not in our own identities. So how do we leave behind preconceived notions and embrace who we want to be? You might want to shake it off. Excellent, Sean. So we've jumped forward from 2006 and 2007 to the second half of 2014, when she made the jump to pop music with her album 1989. 2014 was coincidentally the year that I decided to make my own jump in my identity and transition into a more whole expression of myself as a trans woman, to publicly be out. And so this album has a lot of special meaning to me in my own journey of self-identification. The New York Times wrote glowingly about this change, saying that she is aspiring to something even higher, a mode of timelessness that few true pop stars even bother aspiring to. So she moved from these limitations, broke them, and found acclaim. And the positivity, the dare I say it, good vibes of this album, besides catapulting her to a level of superstardom, also helped me on my journey to say that I was done hiding the things that I liked, that I was done always putting myself into boxes for other people's comfort, especially around my identity as a trans woman, and that I wanted to live for myself, live for loving myself. And this was a crucial shift in understanding my own identity. We move through so many phases of our lives, but it is crucial and so important to make sure that we haven't trapped ourselves into identities that we've made for others. And making these shifts, finding this more true version of ourselves, it can bring so many positive changes. Perhaps, though, it brings both good and bad attention. Surely coming out brought intense expressions of support, but also brought people cutting me out of their lives. Leaving behind our old expressions of ourself is not always going to be easy. It can be challenging. For Taylor, even in superstardom brought on through embracing this new music style, there were pitfalls to celebrity. These pitfalls led to a reevaluation of who she trusted and how she put herself out in the world, including a social media break. She had to search for who truly cared about her. In her song Delicate from her album Reputation, she writes,
"This is for the best. My reputation's even worse, so you was like me for me."
special shout out at this moment for our amazing music team today who helped me with making this service amazing. Even in shaking off our old limitations, we are often stuck with this struggle to still find those that like me for me. People's expectations on us are never going to stop. As a trans woman, even as I embraced authenticity, I can speak to how the public will expect endless expressions of authenticity that slowly grinds you down. And that is why it's so important to surround yourself with friends and with community that embrace you as you truly are. We have to find and have spaces that we can exist in our identities without constant struggle. Following critical slighting of the Reputation album, in 2019, she released the Lover album, dedicated to love in its various forms. In the final track, Daylight, which we heard from in our opening words today, and which I will share again, she writes, "I want to be defined by the things that I love, not the things that I hate, not the things that I'm afraid of, not the things that haunt me in the middle of the night. I just think you are what you love." So in our journey of considering how we define and understand our identity, we've journeyed from feeling out of place to embracing these new versions of ourselves. But when it comes down to it, how do we define ourselves? What is the grounding for this process? And in these lyrics, I think we find the answer. Love. We should find our identity in loving ourselves. We should find our identity in embracing the things we love. It's okay to like and enjoy things. We should find our identity in surrounding ourselves with those who love and care for us. We should find our identity in loving the good we see in ourselves and in the world, even when that is challenging. At Fourth Universalist, I think about how we've defined our communal identity recently with making a new mission statement, as well as engaging in a lot of justice work. These define our identity as a community here. And these actions should be, and I believe are, motivated by love. A love for our community, both here and online. A love for the people around us, for our wider New York City community, and for the world. In our own self-identification, this love needs to flow into actions. As we embrace love and come to better understand ourselves, we must then turn to expressing our love through our actions and our lives. That is how people will come to know who we truly are. There will be times when we think we have it all figured out. And certainty will make us comfortable, but challenges will come, and we shouldn't fear the opportunity to grow. To come to a deeper and more authentic version of ourselves. This will happen over and over, and it's good to continue this process. We must blaze our own path, our own way. As Taylor Swift prepared to tour this Lover album, the world came to a standstill in 2020 with COVID. For so many musicians and artists, the pandemic shut down plans that had been years in the making. But in this moment, Taylor Swift embraced her imagination and her reputation for lyrical storytelling and released 2 brand new albums in the midst of lockdown, Folklore and Evermore. She also began a quest to own her own stories, in a sense, owning her identity, by re-releasing 2 of her old albums so that she can own the masters of her work. Even in challenging moments, we must find new ways to ground ourselves, to claim our identity, to express ourselves and express our identities. We must embrace and keep defining and telling these stories of ourselves. We must find ways to share ourselves with the world around us. We must find ways to share ourselves with friends. We must find community. When she announced this Folklore album, Taylor wrote on Instagram, "In isolation, my imagination has run wild, and this album is the result. A collection of songs and stories that flowed like a stream of consciousness. Picking up a pen was my way of escaping into fantasy, history, and memory. I've told these stories to the best of my ability, with all the love, wonder, and whimsy they deserve. Now it is up to you to pass them down. So I challenge all of you listening, whether online or in person, may we tell our stories. May we define ourselves. May we pass our stories down. May we hold space in community. May we hold space in our lives. May we hold space for both ourselves and for others to figure out their identities. And may we hold space to own our own stories and own our own sense of self. May we have the space to explore, to be real and authentic, and share our truths with the world around us. May we find ourselves. May it be so.